Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something pretty head-turning. It involves a writer, Joris, who had this feeling, this hunch.
Yeah, a hunch that maybe, just maybe, in the literary world right now, an author's identity might be, well, overshadowing the actual quality of the work.
Exactly. And he didn't just think about it, he decided to test it, put it to the test in the real world.
Which is fascinating in itself.
Yeah.
He took his manuscript and submitted it again, but under a completely different name, Sadiqa al-Hadi.
And not just a name, but a whole persona, right? Portrayed as young, Moroccan background, maybe even implied to be attractive.
That seems to be the implication, yes. And the results.
Stark. I mean, really stark. Under his own name, Joris gets rejected.
But, as Sadiqa al-Hadi, instant enthusiasm. The source used the term wit rook, white smoke, like immediate green light.
It's incredible. And you have to remember, he'd been working on this book for a while, right? Since about 2021.
That's right. It wasn't a quick project. It started as a short story, apparently, and grew into this massive 600-page historical epic.
And there was even some talk earlier on about maybe publishing it under his own name, but it just never materialized. Fell through.
So yeah, the core of our deep dive today is really this contrast. The same writing, rejected under one identity, celebrated under another.
Our mission, then, is to unpack what this whole experiment might be telling us about publishing today. You know, about how identity and quality are weighed against each other.
Okay, let's get into that difference in reaction because it's pretty striking.
Right. Joris sends it in, gets a no. Sadiqa al-Hadi sends in the exact same pages.
And suddenly the editors are described as almost fawning over it. The source used the word slimy, which is strong.
Very strong. Talking about emails filled with praise, geweldig und fantastisch, amazing, fantastic, just really laying it on thick.
Super keen to sign her up, bring her into the publishing house. And there was even a hint, wasn't there, that they praised the, quote, authentic voice.
Yeah, the authentic voice and unique cultural perspective, which is, well, ironic given it was written by Joris.
Precisely. The manuscript hadn't changed at all, only the perception of who wrote it.
So it really suggests that other factors were definitely influencing their judgment, beyond just the words on the page.
It certainly backs up Joris's initial suspicion, doesn't it? And maybe what other writers he talked to were feeling too, this focus on perhaps appearance and background.
And the source frames it as exposing a kind of hypocrisy, maybe. The established writer gets overlooked.
While the new voice with the right kind of background gets the red carpet treatment.
It's presented as this stark contrast, the, quote, old white man versus the young, potentially attractive author with a Muslim background.
And the source material tries to give this some context, too. It mentions other examples.
Oh, right. People like Layli Gul.
Yes, Layli Gul, who wrote about her background, and also Jan Akjol, described sort of cheekily as the cuddle Turk.
Right, suggesting maybe certain narratives, certain author profiles just resonate more or are seen as more marketable, perhaps, in the current climate over there.
Which leads to that big question. What's really driving this? Is it genuine interest in diverse voices, which is a good thing in itself, or
is it more about what sells? The source brings up this idea of wokeness potentially being a Verdian model, a business model.
But it also throws in the counterpoint, the go woke, go broke idea, suggesting there's maybe uncertainty or debate within the industry about whether this focus actually pays off financially. It's complex.
Definitely not straightforward. And then there's the whole ethical side of what Joris actually did.
Yeah, you can't really ignore that. His experiment worked, in a way, but it involved deception.
And the publisher's reaction when they found out, well, it's understandable. I'm not working with you. You're a deceiver. Trust is pretty fundamental in that relationship.
Absolutely. But then this story adds another layer, this anecdote about an intern.
Oh, yeah, the progressive intern who apparently made the argument that, you shouldn't even write from the perspective of someone from a different background.
Which is exactly what Joris did in the book itself. Even setting aside the Sadiqa persona, his characters weren't necessarily reflections of his own background.
So that adds a whole other dimension to this identity discussion. It's not just who writes, but who gets to write about what, according to some views.
And the source is careful to point out this isn't like a law or anything.
Right. It says these opinions exist, they're being talked about, but it's currently only an opinion that might be influencing things behind closed doors.
So it's more about the subtle pressures and evolving norms within the industry, maybe?
Then the source pivots again, presenting this other viewpoint, a hope, perhaps, that things might swing back.
Yeah, suggesting maybe the Netherlands could follow what they perceive as a trend elsewhere maybe linked to the U.S., moving away from what the source calls woke terror.
A move back towards focusing purely on literary quality, and maybe Joris's case could be a kind of turning point for writers who feel marginalized for different reasons, like being older white men.
It introduces this idea of a potential pendulum swing in industry priorities, that maybe the focus shifts back and forth over time.
Which leaves Joris in this incredibly ironic spot, doesn't it?
Totally. He's apparently worried now that the only reason the book might get published, under his own name this time, is because of all this controversy.
He called it an irony explosion. The very thing he was trying to critique might end up being the engine for his success.
So, wrapping this up, our deep dive into Joris's story really throws a spotlight on this tension, this conflict almost in the publishing world right now.
Yeah, between how an author's identity is seen and how their actual writing is judged. His experiment really brought that to the surface.
And the key thing for you, listening, to take away is probably that fundamental question it raises. How are books being evaluated? Who gets the platform?
The fact that the exact same words got such wildly different receptions based purely on who they thought wrote them. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it, about the biases or maybe market calculations happening under the surface?
It really does. Which leaves us with that final thought to chew on. What does this whole situation is writing? Joris's experiment, the reactions, the different viewpoints actually tell us about where the literary world is headed.
And maybe more importantly, what role should identity play? How do we balance valuing diverse voices with ensuring literary quality remains central?
It's a tough one. No easy answers, but Joris's, let's call it provocative experiment, has definitely forced the conversation out into the open.